Baruch Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Shevuos Daf Chafal of Shevuos 21. Today's Daf Yomi is dedicated for a Shmir for the Chayalim, that's all for the Shvuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. We're going to begin today's Daf Yomi on Shevuos Chafal, 6 lines from the top. Yesterday we saw the statement that Rav Dimi, who came from Eretz Yisrael, said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that Shevuos Sheker means that it's an false oath about the future, and Shevuos Shav is a false oath about the past. And you need to know precisely what the exact terminology is, because otherwise, if you give a wrong warning, an inappropriate hasra, then the person will not be able to receive the lashes. So now in today's Daf Yomi, the Gemara says Ravin has a different version of what Rabbi Yochanan said. Kiyase Ravin, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Achalti v'lo achalti sheker. If he says, I ate, welcome back, Harold, welcome back. Harold, there's the Gemaras there. They're the ones that are piled up horizontally. And if you mind taking 2 or 3, just in case somebody else comes. Thank you. Okay, so we welcome you back, Harold. We missed you. We missed you a lot. So on 21a, it says that Ravin gives a different version in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Now, what does a Shevuos Sheker mean? We're on 21a, 6 lines from the top. What is a false oath, a Sheker? That is somebody who takes an oath that I ate when I did not eat. So a Sheker not only means about the future, but can also mean about the past. Achalti v'achalti is Sheker, v'as harase. And how do we know that there's a warning about that? Because it says, Milosi shavu b'shmila Sheker, that you're not allowed to swear falsely in my name. Ochel v'lo ochel. So let's say he says, about the future, ochel v'lo ochel, I'm going to eat, and he doesn't end up eating, then he's in violation of a different prohibition called b'lo yachel dvaro, that he's not allowed to make his words chulin, nonsense. Ve'ezu hi shvuas shav, what is considered to be a shvuas shav? Yesterday we said that Rabbi Yochanan's position was that shvuas shav is a false oath about the past. But in this version of Rabbi Yochanan, he says it means nishba l'shanos asayadua adam. It's a person who just swears about nonsense, which is something that's obviously not true. Like he swears that a tree is a stone. So this is the statement that Rabbi Yochanan is saying. Rabbi Avo said, Rabbi Yochanan says a sheker can even be a statement about the false, lo yachel about the past. Lo yachel devaro is a statement about the future, a false statement. And Shevuos Shav is where you take something and say nonsense, something like a tree is a stone. So the Gemara says, Idmar the Amar. So Amar Rav Papa, Had Rabbi Avo, this statement Rav Papa made in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabba Ferish Idmar, it wasn't said explicitly. El Mikloa Idmar. He didn't say it directly. It was derived from another statement that Rabbi Yochanan made, and it was inferred. Amar Rav Idi bar Abba, Amar Rav Amram, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Mishim Rabbi Yossi Ekligli, Kolo Saseh Shebetorah, Rav Sheyesh Bo Ma'aseh Lokin Olav. He says, any lo saseh in the Torah, if it's lav sheyesh bo ma'aseh, you get lashes for. So according to this statement, that Rabbi Yochanan says that if it's a prohibition without an action, with an action you get lashes. And if there's no action associated with it, you don't get lashes, with the exception of nishba, meimar, umekalas chavero b'shem. With the exception of a person who takes a false oath, or a person who does temura, that is where you take an animal that was consecrated and you want to exchange it for a different animal. And then if you curse your friend with God's name. In all these cases, a person has taken an oath, has taken words without an action, done a prohibition without an action, but they still get lashes in those 3 cases. Nishba mino, and how do we know if you take an oath without an action? Have you take a false oath to get lashes? I'm Rabbi Yochanan Mishar Shimmer Yachai. Amar Kol was Tisa Hashem Okechol Hashav. Ki lo yinakeh. He says you shall not take God's name in vain because you will not be absolved by it. God will not absolve you, meaning He won't punish you. On this world, you get punished in the world to come, which means Bezin Shamala Eminakano. So the heavenly court will not absolve you. But the lower court will indeed give you lashes and absolve you. And so therefore we see from here that we basically see from this point that first of all, the Gemara interrupts the brisa, but this was the source for the idea that for a false oath, you're going to get lashes for. And the Gemara interrupts this brisa. We still haven't yet got to the point, but how can you say that because it says lo yinakeh, it means that the lower court will give him lashes? He says maybe all it's saying is maybe it's saying you won't get any punishment, any absolvement at all, that even the lower court. No, the Gemara says no. It can't be that. If it would say just you will not be absolved, then it would be even from the lower court. But since the verse says Hashem, God will not absolve you. So that means Hashem Hashem is the one who will not absolve you. But the lower court will indeed give you lashes. Will give you lashes so. So the Gemara says, Ashkechan Shevuos Shav. We have a source for the idea that a Shevuos Shav is in fact you get lashes for it. Shevuos Sheker Menalan. How do we know that also for a false oath you would get lashes? Rabbi Yochanan Didei Amar l'shav shtei pamim. Rabbi Yochanan himself said it. Why does it say shav twice? Im eino inyan l'shvuas shav t'neo inyan l'shvuas sheker. If there is no if there's nothing, if it doesn't apply for a shvuas shav, then apply it to a shvuas sheker. And this teaches us that that's how we know you get lashes not only for a Shevuos Shav, but also for a Shevuos Sheker. Rabbi Avo, hi Shevuos Sheker, Hechidami. And Rabbi Avo asked on this, what is good morning, Jeffrey? Jeff, I never call you Jeffrey. I said, good morning, Jeff. We're in 21A, around 2/3 of the way down. Hi Shevuos Sheker. So Rabbi Avo, hi Shevuos Sheker, Hechidami. What is the Shevuos Sheker? If you want to say it's an oath that I will not eat, and he ended up eating, that's a lav sheyesh bo ma'asu. That's not a prohibition without an action. Because we need to say that because Rabbi Yochanan is saying you're getting lashes for a prohibition without an action, but that is an action, so it can't be that's what Shevuos Sheker means, because he's saying you get lashes for Shevuos Sheker. Ela d'amar Shevuos she'ochel. So it must be that he says oath that I will eat v'lo achel, and he doesn't end up eating. That can't be. Hi mi loke. That you wouldn't get lashes. So imar Shevuos she'ochel kikar zayom v'avar yom v'lo acha. Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish Amri Travail eino loke. They both say in that cases you don't get lashes. Rabbi Yochanan Amar eino loke mishum davi lav shein bo ma'aseh v'kol lav shein bo ma'aseh loke. Rabbi Yochanan says you don't get lashes in that case because it's a prohibition without an action. Reish Lakish Amar eino loke mishum davi asra safek v'asra safek lo shma hasra. And Rabbi Reish Lakish says the reason why you wouldn't get lashes there is because the warning was not able to be precise. It was a doubt because you don't know if you're not going to eat. So that can't be the case where Rabbi Yochanan says that you get lashes. So Rabbi Yochanan says it must be that it's an oath where you said I ate and I didn't eat. That's where Rabbi Yochanan says you're going to get lashes for a Shevuos Sheker. Umay Shana. And what's the reason why we say that that's what Sheker is, that's what a Shevuos Sheker is? Amarava beferish ripta Torah, meaning to say, what does he mean when he says my Shana? Meaning to say, why is Rabbi Yochanan saying that if you said I ate and you didn't eat, you get lashes, but if you said I will eat and you don't eat, then you won't get lashes? Like, why is this case different? So Amarava beferish ripta Torah Shevuos Sheker domo l'shav, because Rabbi Yochanan is saying that Shevuos Sheker was added on to say explicitly, there was an addition in the Torah to say that the Shevuos Sheker has to be similar to the Shav. Ma Shav la'avar, av Sheker nami l'shavar. So Shevuos Sheker is also about the past. And so that's how we infer that a Shevuos Sheker is referring to an action about the past. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan says you get lashes about that. So that's how they derived it. So the Gemara, yeah.
It's still not an action.
No, Rabbi Yochanan had said that there were three exceptions to the cases where even though there's not an action, you get lashes, and this was one of them. So, yes.
In this case, the future, you say that it's love, and then you become sick through an accident or something. But it could be something that intercedes, makes it possible. So, people that in the past sort of say, I did eat or I didn't eat. In fact, it's the opposite.
Yeah, so that's kind of like Reish Lakish's answer. Can't be an exact warning. But Rabbi Yochanan didn't give that answer. He just said it's a prohibition without an action. And so they're asking, why did he say call that a prohibition without an action when also in the past it's a prohibition without an action? And so they explain that the distinction is that Shevuos Shav, that the past is similar to also the case of Shevuos Shav. And so that's how we know that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that what's called a Shevuos Sheker is also an oath about the past. So the Gemara now challenges this. Eisvei Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Avo. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, he challenges Rabbi Avo, who says that Rabbi Yochanan says you get lashes if you took an oath about the past and you didn't, and it wasn't true. We say, Shevuos shelo ochel kikorzu, an oath that I will not eat this loaf of bread. Shevuos shelo ochalna, and then you took a second oath that I will not eat it. Shevuos shelo ochalna, and then you took a third oath that you will not eat it. Va'achla, and then he eats it. Eno chayav ela achas. You're only going to be liable for one set of lashes, or you're only going to be liable for one oath, because since they were saying that something that you already prohibited, an oath does not apply to another oath. And this is called what we call a Shevuos bitoy. This is a different term, that you're liable for intentionally for lashes and accidentally for a carbon olav. So the Gemara says, Zui mai. When you say this is something that you're liable for, what are we excluding? It's obviously excluding something else. Isn't it excluding the oath about the past? Isn't it referring to something about the past? So isn't it excluding that you're not going to get lashes because about the past? And that's a contradiction to what Rabbi Avo said. Rabbi Yochanan says you get lashes for the past. But when we say that about the future, this is what you get lashes for. Doesn't that mean if you take a false oath about the past, you wouldn't? Where it says, no, no, it's saying that if you took this false oath about the past, you wouldn't bring the carbon olav yored. Zui dal shegasa carbon olav yored of achalti v'achalti lo. So this, if you took the false oath about the future, that's what you get carbon olav yored for, but about the past you wouldn't. V'Rebbe Yishmael. And this statement, this brisa, this Mishnah that we just quoted, this is the position consistent with Rabbi Yishmael, who says, Eino chayav ela tidu avo. You're not going to be liable for a So he says, and this mission is like Rabbi Yishmael, who says, "Eino chayav ela ala tidlavo," that you're only liable only about the future. Avol milka lucky, you're only liable for a carbon olav yored about the future, but not about the past. Umilka lucky, but you would get lashes about a Shevuos bitoy in the past. So the Gemara says, how can you say that this is the position of Rabbi Yishmael? Ema Seifa. But what about the next clause in the Mishnah, which says, Zui Shevuos Shav, Shechayavin al Zdona Makas, Val Shigasa Pater. It says in the next clause of the Mishnah, because the next clause of the Mishnah says, what is the Shevuos Shav? That if you take an oath to change what is known, you say, let's say about a pillar that it's a stone, or a tree, it's a stone, and it says this is the Shevuos Shav shechayevan al zedona makos val shigaso pater, that you're liable for intentionally doing it lashes, but you're exempt from a carbon. Zui lemiute mai wasn't excluding. Glavu miute achalti v'lo achalti isn't excluding the case of where you said I ate and you didn't eat. The low lucky where you wouldn't get lashes. And what's the reason that? And the reason is because we say l'shav does not include Shevuos sheker for malchus. So zui isn't it excluding that you don't get lashes? The Gemara says no. Zui dal shigas pater mikarban. This is the case for Shevuos shav where you're exempt from a carbon. Avachalti v'ochalti al shigas achayev carbon. So it means no. But for if you said I ate and you didn't eat, then if you did it accidentally, you're going to be liable for a carbon. It follows the position of Rabbi Akiva. So the second clause of the Mishnah is consistent with Rabbi Akiva, the Mechayev l'sha'avar k'shalba, who says you're liable for a oath about the past, the Shevuos pitoy, carbon all of yored, just like you are about the future. So do you really want to say this? Ha'amris Reisha Rabbi Shmoli. We just said that the first clause was Rabbi Shmuel. Do you really want to say Reisha Rabbi Shmuel and say for Rabbi Akiva? Do you really want to say the first clause is Rabbi Shmuel and the next clause is Rabbi Akiva? The Gemara says you're right. We don't want to say that. The Gemara says Kula Rabbi Akiva. That everything is like Rabbi Akiva, who says that also about the past. If you take a false oath accidentally, you bring a carbon all of the yoreh. So he says Kula Rabbi Akiva. Reisha lav u'miyute achalti v'achalti mikarban. And the first clause is not coming. Reisha lav u'miyute achalti v'achalti mikarban. When it says in the first clause, this is the example that you're liable for intentionally makos and accidentally for carbon over, which with this oath about the future. It's not coming to exclude the past from a carbon. It's to exclude a different case where you say you will eat, but you don't eat from lashes. Of a carbon mechayev, but you would get a carbon in that case. Why in that case would you get a carbon if you said you will not eat and you ended up eating? And why will you not get lashes, but you will get a carbon? It's more logical to assume that this statement of Zui is referring to the future. It's more logical to assume that since the statement was referring to the future, where you say you will not eat, where you say you will not eat, and then you eat, and therefore it's coming to exclude where you say you will eat and you don't eat. So since it was referring to the future, it's coming to exclude a statement about the future. Then rather than excluding the case about the past and saying you don't get a carbon all of the orient in that case. So that Mishnah is not a question because it's excluding it's all according to Rabbi Akiva. And it's referring to the future a case where you don't get lashes. So now the Gemara says, excuse me, you get lashes, but you don't bring a carbon. Excuse me, you don't get lashes, but you do bring a carbon. Okay, so now the Gemara says, if you take an oath that you're not going to eat, and then you eat even any small amount, you're liable. This was the position in the Mishnah of Rabbi Akiva, which is a radical position, because usually throughout Shas, you're only liable if you eat the shear, the amount. What's the amount? An olive size amount, a kazayas. So in this case, Rabbi Akiva says, if you take an oath, you're not going to eat anything, and then you eat, you say you're not going to eat, and then you ended up eating a morsel, you're liable for the carbon. So the Gemara asked the question, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon's fairway. Does Rabbi Akiva throughout the whole Torah hold like Rabbi Shimon, who says you're liable with even any small amount? The Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omar Kolshu and Mos, bless you. You pass the tissues, yeah. The Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer Kolshu and Makos, Omer Kazayas Ela Inyan Carbon, and Rabbi Shimon only says lashes as it relates to a carbon. So hold on, let me just start again. We have a question. Is Rabbi Akiva in the whole Torah hold like Rabbi Shimon, who says you're liable for any amount? The Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer Kol Shu Makos, that Rabbi Shimon says if you eat even a small amount of something prohibited, you get lashes. And when do we say kazayis? It's only with respect to a carbon. Ubedinu, and we might have thought debai ifluge ba'alma, that really in general Rabbi Akiva does not agree with Rabbi Shimon. And the only reason that the Tana tells us here this law specifically is Lodiach Kochan D'Rabbanan. Meaning to say, in general, Rabbi Akiva agrees with Rabbi Shimon throughout the Shas that you're liable on any small amount. And the only reason why here it specifies that he argues with the Rabbanan is to show us the power of the Rabbanan's position. Because we could have said that if a person says, I'm not even going to, I take an oath, I'm not going to eat even one morsel of bread, the Rabbanan would say you're liable. So also here, if you just don't mention anything, we might have thought you're also liable even less than a kazayas. And the Rabbanan say, no, it has to be a kazayas. Kamash melon de patre. So it's teaching us the position that the Rabbanan say you're pater. For me, in general, Rabbi Akiva holds like the Rabbanan that you're only liable for a kazayas. And what's the reason here why Rabbi Akiva says you're only liable, that you're liable even for less than kazayas? Since if you took an oath about a morsel, you'll be liable. Also, if you don't specify, you're going to be liable. So we want to know, does Rabbi Akiva agree with Rabbi Shimon throughout Shas or with the Rabbanan? And this is the exception. Tashma the Amr lo Rabbi Akiva. So we have the Mishnah in Nazir. Excuse me, Tashma. We have our Mishnah that it says, what did the Rabbanan say? The Amr lo Rabbi Akiva echam matzina ba'ochel koshu chayev shezeh chayev. Because the Rabbanan say to Rabbi Akiva, where do you see in general that you're liable in any amount, so that you'd be liable here in any amount? Vim Isa, and if it's the case that Rabbi Akiva, if it's the case, and if it is the case that Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon throughout the whole Shas, Leimohu, let him say to them, Ana b'kol Torah kula Rabbi Shimon Sfirle. I hold like Rabbi Shimon, and that's so from the fact that he doesn't say, and he must agree with the Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, no, that's not an answer. With the frame, the Rabbanan Kamerlu. He's saying his position according to the position of the rabbis. He says, Lidi di b'kol Torah kula Rabbi Shimon Sfirle. He's saying, I hold like Rabbi Shimon that you don't need an amount, but with the daichu, but according to you, Oduli Mia, at least admit to me, Ho Mefarish Chayev Dam Nami Chayev. You should at least admit to me in this case that you're liable. You got a problem with that? Beautiful. What his position is. And the Rabbanan say, no, that's not our position. The Gemara again attempts to know what's Rabbi Shimon saying. Tashma. What's Rabbi Akiva saying? So we have a Mishnah in Nazir. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Nazir Shasharo Pito B'yayin. Let's say you have a Nazirite that soaked his bread and wine. And there's enough to take all the wine and the bread and combine it into an olive-sized portion. Chayev, he's going to be liable. So we see Rabbi Akiva must say you need to have an olive-sized amount. Gemara says, if he says you don't need a kazayas, then then why does he need to combine it? He should be liable for any amount. And we have another Mishnah in Shevuos. And he takes a note that he's not going to eat anything. And then he eats all these foods that are not that are basically Shevuos shel ochel. He says, I'm not going to eat anything, and he eats these non-kosher foods. Chayev, he's liable. Rabbi Shimon Pater. Rabbi Shimon says you're exempt. Why you're liable in the first case? He's mushba me'ar Sinai. He's already took an oath against the velos, treifos, and shkatim Muslim. So it shouldn't that from Sinai you're not allowed to eat it. So why are you liable? So Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yochanan, Amri Travail, Bekol Dvarma Mutarma and Dvarma Surim. The reason why the oath takes effect is because you included other items with the prohibited things. So therefore it wasn't all prohibited at Sinai. Reish Lakish Amar Yatamotze Ela Ibn Mefarish Chatzi Shir Valiba Darabanan. Reish Lakish says the reason why when do we say this reason that you're including prohibited things with permitted things? You'll only find that either by a case of Chatzi Shir, where you say I'm limiting just a small amount, according to the Rabbanan, who say that you're not prohibiting even a small amount, meaning to say that if you just said mefaresh, you say I'm not eating like less than a kazayas, well then that would be a new oath because you're only prohibited, biblically speaking, against an olive size amount, or the stam haliba de Rabbi Akiva, or by just basically saying it because Rabbi Akiva requires even not by a kazayas the adam osar the kolshu. So therefore, we see from Reish Lakish, Rabbi Akiva does not agree with Rabbi Shimon throughout the Shas, but only in this case. Because the person intended to prohibit himself to just a kolshu. And if you want to say Rabbi Kiva holds like Rabbi Shimon, we would say kolshu nami mushba v'oma me'ar sinahu. Then even a smaller amount is prohibited from Sinai, and the oath wouldn't take effect. Alav mina shema mina ba'almak rabbanan tefirulei shema mina. So we see from here that in general, at least from Reish Lakish's logic, because otherwise it would have said that he was mushba v'oma me'ar Sinai, that Rabbi Akiva does not in general hold like Rabbi Shimon. So that in general he holds like the Rabbanan. Okay, so we'll stop the recording here, and Baruch Hashem.